This is a great podcast. I'm so excited. It's our first one, Scott. I'm really, I thought we covered a lot of ground on the episode. And I think listeners, if they're curious about all things real estate, investment, different opportunities that exist within the Charlotte, North Carolina, area, this would be one they want to tune into. What are your thoughts?
Are you currently renting? This is an episode you will not want to miss.
Real estate. Real estate. Real estate. Real estate. Real estate.
Real estate.
Welcome to season 2 of Charlotte Real Estate Talk.
So the topic today is why real estate. And I think if people watching this channel, listening to this channel, they're interested at some level of real estate, maybe curiosity, maybe they've heard things and they just want to be more aware of what's going on. But the question today is, and we want to help answer and go deep on, is why real estate? Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the term real estate means many things to different people, right? So certainly in our world, it can mean what we do professionally, but it also is how we invest, right? We do invest in real estate. We work with investors. We work with buyers and we work with sellers and homeowners. And, so each person, there's certainly a VIN and an underlying understanding of each person's perspective. But what I would like to talk about first, if that's okay, is real estate as it relates to Charlotte and where we are in the market and why we feel that it's a good time to invest.
I love the way that you phrase that because it's so true. You really think of if you're buying or selling or relocating at some level, maybe not looking at a spreadsheet for a cap rate like a corporate institutional investor might look at, but you are looking at it from the standpoint, is this a good community? Is this a place where I want to raise my family? Are these good amenities that I want to be a part of? Is this where my kids want to go to school? Do they want to go to the softball field? What have you? So that is an investment. It's investment in your time, investment in your community. And is a place, if you're relocating, you might say, is this a place that I want to grow roots and anchor in? So I love that you phrase it as an investor. We do work with investors that are looking for cap rates and NOIs and all those things that they would look at to determine if this is a good investment or not. But I think that's even buying or selling in general is a frame, a lens to look at, is this a good investment? So,
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. For most people, real estate is the item or the aspect of their wealth that is worth the most money, right? And to your point, where the real estate is located has more to do with one's enjoyment than what they're buying.
Wow.
Right?
It's true. It's really true. And as it relates to Charlotte, we feel really fortunate here in the Queen City where, obviously I grew up here. I've seen nothing but orange barrels and skyscrapers, most of the time. And some of the buildings that used to be here are no longer here, and replaced. It's like, here's a brick, that here lies this building. But what we've seen is this change, this transformation. We're really fortunate with so many people moving here where we call this home and we've got great weather. We're close to the beach, close to the mountains. We have great industry here. There's 3 lakes. There's a lot to do here to get excited about around Charlotte.
I'm sure like I do, we enjoy when we interact with people relocating to Charlotte, we love asking them what drew them to Charlotte. And sometimes it's a job, sometimes it's warmer climate, sometimes they want to be closer to grandchildren or family. I just love hearing from people that are relocating to Charlotte what is driving them to decide to move to the Charlotte region. And with the great migration we're currently in the middle of, what we're seeing a lot of is people that are deciding to cash out, meaning to sell their long-time family home. They may own it outright in New York or Connecticut or even Florida, and they want to be in Charlotte. They want to be in the Sun Belt. And the secondary driver for that, I think, is also because they already know people. They visited Charlotte. They love the area. They've had a taste of what it means to live in North Carolina, right? And then people share how much they love the area, and then that builds on itself. So So I think the whole idea of real estate and investing is, first with primary homes. But what we've also found is sometimes these people move here and then they want to go ahead and buy rental property.
Oh, totally.
Or they want to buy a place in the mountains or out, on the coast.
We talk to our friends across the nation from various different groups, and even within our firm, we talk to them about our price point and how we still have affordable housing and what that relates to in comparison to areas that are much colder or much more expensive. And fortunately, again, for Charlotte, we still have opportunities either within the Queen City or shortly outside in the burbs. And it's kind of that gentrification that happens within the core of the city that we've seen get pushed outward. And then we're still a growing city where there's land mass. When you fly into Charlotte Douglas and you land, you can see pockets of land that is still yet to be built on.
We're certainly not as densely populated as other areas like Atlanta, D.C., and some of these other areas. But you're right. There's still plenty of room for development. For the longest time, we've had an airport that could support a larger city than we currently have, which has been a great move for Charlotte.
Totally.
The leadership of Charlotte to really pour into our airport was a fantastic move that really started a good 40 years ago.
That's a great point. I mean, I think personally, in the 80s with Hugh McCall and leading into the 90s with the whole Bank of America, who's the CEO for a long time, he did so much for growth for the Queen City, put it on the map as a second banking capital underneath New York. In the modern times with fintech, financial technology, and all the industry centered around the banking and the financial space, I mean, we've seen this. I don't think we ever played catch up from that growth trajectory of putting it on the map. And we've been evolving as a city ever since.
And obviously with folks that are relocating in, they're we are, as they are, the beneficiary of proper planning, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Do we have traffic problems? You ask enough people, they'll probably say yes, but then it's all about perception and perspective, because we do help people that move in from LA or Atlanta or DC, and they say, guys, you don't have a traffic problem.
Yeah, it's not compared to that.
Right.
I mean, 77 going north where I'm at in the Lake Norman area, there's 100,000 cars a day at the current moment of this filming. And the truth is, it's painful, but there's a toll option that was added. I think the city has done a good job of considering, to your point, of planning related to the rail system and the long-range planning. I think it requires public-private partnerships to coexist and to figure out a way through that. It's taxpayer dollars at a higher level, and I think you have to navigate all that. You're growing pains as a city. The truth is, if you want to move a person from A to B, how do you do it in the most efficient manner? Right now, car is still the most dependent way as a society we kind of rely on, unless it's a walkable community within the city. And so we've seen an uptick and an appreciation, massive wave for walkable communities that are close to center city activities. And the rail line, fortunately, like in South End, for example, you can hop on the rail line, get pretty much all the way south to Pineville, all the way north with the Blue Line, and a lot of cool things in the city are the next big things to come that are probably centered around the rail system.
Oh, totally. And if, a lot of people forget that the proposed rail line, when it was to be voted on, failed time and time again until the city decided. And at that time, and once again, it's the leadership of the city looking at the long-range view. Even though it was voted down to be supported by the constituents, the people that live in Charlotte, the city proceeded because the city leaders said, listen, we need this, and it's a good move. We may not be able to all see that it's a benefit now, but it will be in the future, as it has been.
Totally. And when you go to any major metropolitan cities like DC and LA, you mentioned, I mean, you think about how they move people. It's either you sit in hours of traffic, which we do not have that problem in Charlotte, fortunately. It actually does move.
Sure, right.
So it's stop and go, but it does move compared to the cities you mentioned. But you have this place in transit where it's so efficient, like in Chicago or, even broader, London and the Tube. People are in and out of these rail systems that are highly efficient, highly organized, and well utilized. So I don't think Charlotte's fully utilized a rail system, the toll system. I still think we have capacity, and that's the thought leadership of planning ahead for what's to come.
Yep. So obviously the word real estate, that term that comes into play, and when people are identifying where they want to live in the city, of course they look at the walkability, proximity to wherever they may work, but also parks and schools. There are just so many different factors that come into play. Let's talk more about the migration as it relates to real estate. So people, they come in from New York or Connecticut or Florida where they're paying 3 times as many property taxes, right?
So true.
Yeah. So how do those numbers work?
I remember when real estate school almost 20 years ago, they were talking about above all is the land. Well, in places like New York where there is highly density, you may not get the benefit of having any land. You may have to be in a condo right on top of your neighbors, and that's the environment of what home feels like to you because that's what you grew up in. Here we're fortunate that we have single family dwellings that are detached from structures, and we have properties with a beautiful tree canopy that Charlotte has, nature and parks. So I think real estate as it relates to an investment, particularly for someone coming from other areas to here, and there's so many beautiful properties that are here between historic to, if there is density in townhome, to even new construction that a lot of other markets don't see, again, because of the land mass, the affordability, and what the product market fit is such the right fit for so many people. So we see an influx for relocating buyers that look for those type of opportunities. And to be frank, I think there's a lot of unique opportunities within the investment space with new construction as it relates to on the ground. We've seen time and time again someone purchase a home brand new, stay in the home for 2 to 5 years, and seen an upsurge because in neighborhoods where there's mostly historic homes or older homes and you have a new construction, it stands out so different, that we see like an uptick of demand for that product, and there's only so much being built at any given time.
Certainly. We are certainly in a deficit of existing homes that are offered for sale, but I'd say it's even compounded more so with new construction. I feel like as we get more through maybe the middle and end of 2024, we'll start to see more properties come online. I certainly don't think there'll be a big flush of inventory per se, but I think as the market strengthens, we'll see more builders go ahead and submit for new permits, so for potential new developments.
That's a great early indicator too. I'm so glad you brought that up. Like the early indicator for a lot of markets, particularly like ours that does have new construction, is following what are the builders looking at and how many permits are they pulling for new communities and like takedown community land acquisitions. You can get a really early read on a builder or developer that's taken down a 20-acre tract and something that's proposed for something that's approved for something, is something being built with a coming soon sign. You could look at that timeline, and obviously they didn't show up one day and start building houses. There was a detailed process that may have been years in the making at that particular location. So sometimes you can check that and really kind of get an early read. And I think at this moment in time, there is a deficit. Totally agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously everything, price is related directly to inventory. So we continue to see prices increase in spite of interest rates. And the large driver for that is lack of inventory.
That's a good point. I think people make moves too. I mean, their jobs, their school, there's different reasons people move. And the interest rate, I think someone asked recently, like, what's the interest rate where you think sellers would get off the fence and want to sell? I'm like, the truth is at any given time, someone may make a move because it's highly personal to them. They may want to cash out their equity from somewhere else, like the earlier scenario. It's a great case study for how many Northeasterners have moved to Florida. It's too hot, too pricey, and come halfway back, coined half back to the Carolinas in that scenario alone with the Great Migration. But also like these price, fluctuations we've seen have generally been on the rise for 30, 40 years of just slow and steady.
Sure.
And we still have room to grow, which is hard to believe if you're local in the moment, but there is capacity for going even higher than it currently
For sure. We are very much affordable, and it may not feel like it for those folks that have lived in Charlotte a long time. It feels like there's been such a run up in values, but once again, everything is relative. So as more and more people relocate in, then prices are ticked up based on more buyers than we have sellers, right? It's that natural progression.
Totally. And so we think of this topic of why real estate. I mean, personally, I got in this business, like many people know, but I used to be a nurse and wanted to help people. I got out of that industry because I wanted to do something more than life or death, truly life or death scenarios. These days, negotiating repair requests, yeah, it's stressful, but maybe not quite the same caliber, right? But at least from the standpoint of why real estate, there was something appealing about home ownership, and investment. And in that order, sometimes home means different things to different people, but home ownership is the next logical choice, where it's your safe place. It's where your family raise. It's where you go at home when you're after work and you can decompress. It's your sacred space. So I think the idea of home ownership, there's a lot of talk out there about, like it's just an expensive time with interest rates the way they are. And interest rates go up, go down. But the truth is you make a decision based on what's best for you at the time. And related to investment, there's always opportunities there if you have that mindset and you're always looking.
Yeah, no question. Homeownership is how you really get your foothold in growing your wealth. That is foundational. That's usually the first step, especially for young folks, millennials, what have you. Eventually, they do tire of true communal living.
That's true.
Living in a high-rise apartment, and rents continue to be increased, and have no control as to how, of building equity, no equity whatsoever, right? And certainly limited tax write-offs if they don't own real estate, with having home office exemption or what have you. But in addition to that, it's just more and more people are wanting to get, pets, have a yard, have a garden. So there are things, right? And it's just that evolution. And there's also some pressure that we're seeing with millennials and other people out in the marketplace that are wanting to rent because they love the carefree lifestyle. They want to be able to travel and what have you. But eventually they come back to wanting to own real estate.
Yeah, I think we've heard it said that, like, own real estate, own it early, own it often, something along those lines.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is the sooner someone can get in the market, it's compound interest over time. I mean, I think of our very first home and what that did for us personally and financially, where when we sold it, we really regretted that decision. In a lot of ways, we wanted to keep it. And looking back in the moment, you don't know that. But we always go back to looking at real estate in the rears can be dangerous. Like, you don't generally want to do that. But from us, that set us up to put 20% down on the next property, allowed us to renovate a property, which catapulted us. And we ended up moving a few times, ended up to the home we're in currently. But you use that equity strategically, and it really does set you up for a really well positioned in life.
It's really a forced savings account if you think about it, right? You're building equity through the payments that you make, but over time, that appreciation, it builds, I'm here to tell you, especially in Charlotte, even greater than what you could pay down the principal. And on average, what's the average appreciation right now based on year over year?
4 or 5% per year since 1978.
Yeah. So obviously, if you're looking at just a snapshot, it could be up or down, right, at any given moment. But it's the long-term vision that makes real estate a good move, right?
Totally. Someone asked me recently, they said, we're debating on selling, cashing out. Our financial advisor said, let's put the money in the market and we'll rent. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. One, it's good to know that I have a lot of close friends that are financial advisors, and they're incentivized by putting money in the market. No shade on any financial advisors listening. However, it's a highly personal decision. If someone needed to pay off debt, found a great opportunity, and there was they needed to make a relocation in a timely manner, sometimes there's reasons for selling. And again, that's a highly personal circumstance. But in the end, my advice would be to hold if you can, because it's a place to live, versus rent, to the earlier points we made,
right,
which is not building equity, not having the garden, not having a place for your dogs, and being really limited on what you're getting for your money. You're basically getting a shell of a space. And I'm a firm believer, if you can anchor yourself and build equity, you'd kill two birds with one stone, so to speak.
Absolutely. Let's talk about another benefit about the term real estate, buying rental property.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
So for those that are listening, Mike, what's the BRRRR method?
That's a great method. BRRRR method implies you buy something, you rehab it, you renovate it, you refinance out of it, and you repeat the process. In the current environment, the BRRRR method is more challenging because of the current interest rates, because that would also imply that you're going to keep the asset and then broaden what you're purchasing and acquire more. I remember I took a class, it was years ago, this was when we started investing in property. It was Give Your Kids a Chance, that was the name. And the idea was...
Larry Kendall.
Yeah. That's a shout out to him, the ninja selling method. And we actually met him. Do you remember that? This was years ago. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Scott, did you have hair at that time?
I think I may have. It was a long time ago.
This is me pre-kids too. That's your normal go-to for me.
For sure.
So at that time, it was mentioned that if you can hold on to a property and buy it for your kid, then give your kids a chance, meaning that let that tenant pay off the note, and at the end of that process, then sell the property, keep renting the property, refinance the property, take your options out of that opportunity that you've invested in for your kid and give them a chance to go to college, start a business, use the funds for strategic, growth for your child. And that mindset really resonated with me because at the time, our kids were young, and I'm thinking when they go to college, that's the long-term mindset. So if I have to write a check for a new roof that happens to be, and I can't get an insurance claim and it's just the way it is, I'm happy to write that check. You know why? Because I'm gonna write the kids, if they're going to college, write a new car, a new this. But at the end of 18 years, let's say, if you started when they were 1 year old, how much principal reduction, maybe even paid off after 18 years if you're aggressive?
Yep.
What about the depreciation schedule that you've been able to use for the 27 and a half years on your tax returns?
So true.
What about all the opportunities for income that you've received over 18 years? Factoring all of that, what if, in a simple mathematical formula, and this was pitched to me at the time, it's a $100,000 property, you put $20,000 of your own money into it. Where else, Scott, can you give someone $20,000 at the end of 18 years? If you're aggressive, you get $80,000 back. And that's assuming the property hasn't appreciated a penny. So you have a $100,000 asset that somebody paid off $80,000 of debt to. And is it going to appreciate in 18 years? In our market, well, we already talked about it since 1978, is 4.7%. Yes, the likelihood is strong that it's going to appreciate, and you have the depreciation schedule, and you have all the income that you've received for 18 years. So when you really break down the math related to rental property, we use a great tool all the time, and certainly Bigger Pockets is a fantastic podcast. Shout out to them. If they ever want to have us on, we would love to talk real estate.
That's a great podcast.
Into Charlotte. Absolutely. I love that. There's some free tools there, but even one that's not logging in and doing all this stuff is calculator.net, and log in and type in rental property. And there's some metrics there that you can type in, some assumptions, if you will. Exomer purchase price, long hold time, closing cost, how much rehab,
All the variables. You can you drop in those aspects. Yeah.
You drop in those, and then you hit calculate. And what I love about that is it gives you, for the next duration of the holding period, what your cash on cash return is, what your net operating income is, what the cap rates are. It gives you some variables that you can quickly look at. Is this a good deal or not? Because when you talk about how to buy a rental property, obviously we're bullish on Charlotte. I'm from Charlotte. We know that Charlotte's a great investment class, single family homes, and a lot of different real estate here, land included. But I really think if you look at the math and you turn the page from a lot of other places in America, you mentioned LA, New York, I think that might be where people just hold on to it forever and they know that it's going to continue to appreciate. Maybe that's the appreciation play. Here we have the rare benefit of having cash flow, appreciation, and all the benefits we talked about real estate. The math works.
No, it's so true. Usually investors are looking to score on one or the other, cash flow or appreciation. To your point, here in Charlotte, we have the luxury of getting both, right?
Totally.
Yeah, and certainly in different pockets, one might lean towards cash flow versus appreciation or vice versa within the greater Charlotte. Yeah. Meaning Concord versus Huntersville, Pineville versus Matthews, what have you.
Yeah, it's a great point. And there's also nuances, assuming we're talking about a buy and hold rental, it's going to be a different strategy than a short-term rental. Those may not be in the same conversation. Generally, you can charge a little more. You'd expect to receive more or pay more if you're a short-term rental. If you're staying anywhere and you have a fully furnished place that has all these vibrant colors and a cool environment, and they're offering even coffee and ketchup, and they got down to your fork and knives, you would expect to pay a little bit more. It's like a turnkey property. That's the evolution of Airbnb and Verbos in the world, the short-term rentals space. I think those are even where it's higher level of management, but potentially a greater return if you're hands-on.
Yep. So I got a question. Shift gears just a little bit. So if you were a relocating family, if you and your family were relocating to Charlotte, and your budget was, let's say, $850 to $1 million, and you wanted to be, and you have grade school age kids, give me the top 3 areas that you would want to consider, knowing what you know now, having been in real estate for 20 plus years.
It's a great question. You're a relocating buyer and all the variables you'd mentioned. I would look at in town is going to be difficult if you want space. You could find it, but it's going to be difficult if you want space. So if you have 2 or more kids, I would assume you want at least a 4 or 5 bedroom home.
Yeah, let's say 4 to 5 bedroom. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that case, I would say, personally, I'm biased on the north because we moved from Ballantyne to the north many moons ago. Actually, ironically enough, as a side note, we moved to get away from traffic. I think it found us. But anyway, I would say Cornelius and Davidson would be probably top on the list for many people for many reasons. And I would say Matthews, Ballantyne would be kind of some close Fort Mill. I know in that band, that southeast Charlotte.
Sure.
So I would say generally that's where most people, and what that would require then, if you can't get it in town, is go a little further out. If you need more space, maybe you need a newer home, but you want to stay in that price band. If you're able to go a concession or look at from the lens of maybe I can go a little bit less space, a little bit older home, maybe it's been renovated. Maybe I want a little bit more, a little more spread out, a larger lot size. Sometimes in town you can find that. It does exist. It's just harder to find when it's under $1 million. What's been your experience that you've seen?
Yeah, and you, as you mentioned, you do a lot of stuff on the north side of town. I do more of my business on the south side, as you know. I would say if I were to answer that same question, I would probably suggest some folks look maybe in the Madison Park area in that price range, Cotswold, and maybe the Beverly Woods area, which is around South Park. Now, you're not going to get as much square footage as you would in Davidson, Cornelius, Matthews, but you're going to have probably a larger lot, but less square footage. I think you could still do 4 bedroom. Okay. A lot of in the older communities that I work, not all the homes have garages in that price range. Some do. I know on the north side, more of them do have garages because those are newer homes, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah, the 1990s, think about the evolution of Charlotte. 1990s was pretty much the exit point. It was South Park and Ballantyne were kind of like, those are the fringes of Charlotte. If you look at pre-90s, same as Burkdale and Huntersville, and that's predominantly the area, the Lake Norman area that I do a lot of my business around. Huntersville, Cornelius, Davison, Mooresville, and out. There was a recreational lake that people came up to fish, and then they went back to Charlotte, and that was about it. And then at some point it shifted when Burkdale was developed, or people started to say, no, I could live up here. There's actually shopping, and I want to live on the water, around the lake. So it became where I could actually live and work in that area. And so then people were commuting if they had to come to Charlotte, but they were actually living on the water. And then, that's kind of been the evolution. So I think 1990s onward, you're right, it's mainly newer houses. Yep. Similar story to Ballantyne, actually, in Waxhaw, some of the newer properties we've seen in that area. And that's the past 20, 30 years we've seen.
Oh, yeah. Actually, my first place was a condo in Sedgefield, which is very close to South End, between South End and Myers Park. And I paid $67,000 for it.
Man, can you find anything in Charlotte, North Carolina for that?
No. That was many moons ago. Yeah, that same condo unit is around $350 now.
How many?
It was a 1 bedroom.
One. Okay, one.
That was my first
2.
place. Yeah,
man.
Yeah, and then from there, Barclay Downs, which was at the time $225. That same home today is just about a 1.1, 1.2.
Wow, come a long way, man.
Yeah.
the area
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this brings us back to the point that you made, getting your foot in the door, buying. The amount of appreciation I saw for that first condo, I owned it for 6 years. As I recall, I think I may have I doubled my money over 6 years.
Wow.
Okay, so I took that nut and used it as a down payment on the next home. Right?
Great strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why real estate? Many reasons, as we already talked about. But the number one is, man, it's a heck of an investment.
Yes, it
Walls
is.
down.
It
Yeah.
is. And I know we're kind of all over the place, but hopefully I enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, I always enjoy
hopefully
it.
the folks listening also enjoyed it.
Yeah.
We all have our little favorite areas and pockets around town. The good news is, you know, you and I are still active in the business. We're very much attuned to our market, what's available and what the trends are and what buyers most enjoy about each of these given areas.
Totally. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation also. I think we covered a lot of ground, and we laid the framework for future podcasts. I'm super excited. We got some super cool guests coming down the pipe related to real estate and community. So I can't wait to see what future episodes look like. So with that in mind, I guess we'll wrap for our first episode back of season 2.
That's right, Charlotte Real Estate Talk. Thank you so much for joining us.
If we don't see you around the Queen City, we'll see you here on the podcast.